Emma Carter was 32, a standout financial strategist based in San Francisco. Her name often appeared in Forbes profiles and top women under 35 lists, but one thing she'd never been able to earn was the recognition of her father, Charles Carter. The Carter family lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, a neighborhood so pristine and manicured it looked pulled straight from an architecture magazine. To neighbors and the wider community, they were the embodiment of success. Charles was the founder of Carter Developments, a multi-generational real estate empire. Margaret, Emma's mother, was a former local charity board chair. Their children were all Ivy League educated. But beneath the polished surface was a silence that had haunted Emma her whole life. Charles was the kind of man who valued legacy and structure above all else. Emotions were weaknesses. Everything had to convey triumph, degrees, job titles, social circles. And in that curated list of what mattered, Emma had never quite made the cut. Since childhood, Charles had been a critic rather than a parent, questioning her B-plus grades, wondering why she wasn't team captain, reminding her that second place is just the best loser. Her mother, Margaret, was gentle when Charles wasn't around. But in his presence, she would shrink her eyes, always flicking toward him before answering even mundane questions like, "What's for dinner?" or "Are we going out this weekend?" From a young age, Emma sensed something wasn't right, an invisible barrier between her and the home she was supposed to belong to. She was the middle child. Her older brother, Drew, was the Golden Sun Star quarterback, Brown University graduate, now a VP at the family business. Grace, the youngest, was sweet, socially adept, and skilled at diffusing Charles's temper with humor and quiet charm. But Emma. She always felt out of step, not obedient enough to be doted on, not clever enough to be forgiven. She built herself from scratch. After college, she declined the offer to join the family business, moved to the West Coast, and started from the bottom. Every move she made was driven by a need to prove that she was enough, even without the Carter name behind her. But this year, with the annual 4th of July family gathering approaching, Emma felt more burdened than usual. She'd bought her father a luxury car, an expensive gift meant to shatter the invisible wall between them, and yet somewhere deep down she still doubted herself. Could a car really buy what she'd never had in 3 decades? A proud glance, a genuine, "I'm proud of you," from the man who never once called her daddy. From her earliest memories, Emma Carter had lived in the shadow of her own family. No matter how hard she tried, her accomplishments were always weighed against and found lacking compared to those of her older brother, Drew Carter. Drew was everything their father Charles had ever wanted in a son, tall, charming, athletic, and proudly carrying the Carter legacy like a crown. Even when Emma won the state math competition in 10th grade, Charles simply asked, "Why not debate team math whizzes are a dime a dozen?" When she received a full scholarship to the University of Chicago, he frowned, not Harvard like Drew. And when she majored in finance instead of real estate, he sighed, "That field is volatile. Real assets are the foundation of real legacy." That kind of criticism was never aimed at Drew. His failures were reframed as growing pains or learning experiences. Meanwhile, Emma's victories were chalked up to luck or timing. Her younger sister Grace moved like a gentle current through the Carter household. She had the uncanny ability to make their father laugh, to soothe their mother's nerves, and to offer Emma small anchors of comfort after tense family dinners. Grace would slip into her room, sit beside her on the bed, and whisper, "You're doing your best, Em." The problem is, for him, no one's ever enough. But those words, however kind, couldn't ease the ache of emotional neglect. Emma grew up believing that she had to be more, better, perfect just to earn the basic dignity of love. She didn't live to find herself, she lived to prove that she deserved a seat at the Carter table. After college, she turned down the offer to join Carter Developments. She knew exactly what she'd be: a legacy hire, a charity case in Charles's eyes. So she moved to San Francisco, a city where no one cared about her last name. She started with an unpaid internship, crashing on her best friend's couch, applying to every firm that would take a look. Eventually, she landed a junior role at Bay Point Capital. Over the next 8 years, Emma didn't just survive, she thrived. She worked longer hours than anyone, studied for certifications. After midnight, skipped holidays, and birthdays, climbed the ladder with sheer grit. When she was finally promoted to senior investment strategist, the youngest person to ever hold the role, she almost forgot why she'd started climbing in the first place. It wasn't for the title or the money. It was for one sentence she had never heard: "You did good, Emma." But even at the pinnacle of a career others envied to Charles Carter, she remained the daughter who never quite fit, never quite obeyed, and perhaps never truly belonged. As June approached and the annual family reunion invitation landed in her inbox, subject line: Carter Family Gathering, Independence Weekend. Emma Carter felt the old weight pressing down again. In past years, she had shown up quietly, lingering at the margins, waiting for praise that never came. But this year, she'd decided to do something different. A week after receiving the invite, Emma wired nearly a year's salary to purchase a brand new Mercedes-Benz S-Class, sleek, black exterior, leather interior, top-tier safety features, voice control, and the finest sound system available. It was the very model Charles had once admired during a visit to a golf club friend's house. She remembered his exact words: "Now that's a car for someone who's made it." Emma didn't just buy a car. She bought a symbol. In her mind, it wasn't a vehicle, it was validation. The final offering. The key maybe to unlocking a father's pride that had been bolted shut for 32 years. She planned it meticulously. The car would be delivered to a dealership just outside Greenwich. The day before the reunion, dressed in a navy blue dress her mother had once said her father found tasteful, Emma drove to her parents' estate with a small gift box containing the Mercedes key. Charles answered the door with his usual neutral expression, as though Emma were a courier. When she handed him the box, he opened it with polite indifference until he saw the shining Mercedes emblem. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Not joy, not gratitude, just calculation. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, stepping to the window. When he spotted the car gleaming in the driveway, he moved briskly outside. He circled the car twice like he was appraising a commercial property. He asked about insurance, warranty coverage, fuel efficiency, every question clinical, detached. There was no thank you. Just a comment about how foolish it was to waste money on something so extravagant. "You should have invested like Drew, real assets," he muttered, then slipped behind the wheel for a brief drive, noting the steering felt a little loose. When he parked it, he rolled it into the garage, hidden from view. Emma had imagined he would showcase it proudly at the reunion, parked front and center like a trophy. Instead, he buried it like a secret. That evening, Emma sat in her hotel room, phone pressed to her ear, recounting the cold reception to her college best friend Jasmine. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it wavered. Jasmine wasn't surprised. "You did something most people would never dare. He didn't deserve it. Take the car back. Keep your dignity." Emma didn't answer. Part of her knew Jasmine was right. But part of her, still 12 years old, still waiting for her dad to take her to a Yankees game, believed that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be different. In the clutch Emma Carter brought back to Greenwich, there wasn't just lipstick, a phone, or her hotel keycard. Tucked in a hidden pocket pressed flat between two pieces of cardboard was a thick white envelope containing DNA test results she never intended to share. But now, with every step she took, it weighed on her like lead. 3 months earlier, Emma had submitted her DNA to a well-known genetic testing service just out of curiosity. She wanted to learn about ancestry health markers, even family traits. But the results came back with a shock she couldn't shake: no paternal genetic match to Charles Carter, the man she had called Dad for over 3 decades. Doubt crept in like a slow-spreading crack. To confirm, Emma had quietly collected hair from Charles's hairbrush during a brief visit home. She sent it to a private lab for a paternity comparison. 2 weeks later, the results returned with devastating certainty Charles was not her biological father. And suddenly, everything made sense. The indifference, the constant comparisons, the way he smiled at Drew and Grace yet barely acknowledged her presence, as if she were separated from him by invisible glass. She had always believed she needed to try harder to be better. But now she realized maybe the playing field had never been level. Maybe she was never truly accepted to begin with. Emma hadn't told anyone, not yet. Not even her mother Margaret, the one person who might hold the missing context. Emma hadn't asked. She wasn't ready to hear the explanations, the apologies, the stories from a past she never chose to be part of. All she knew was that the truth in that envelope had permanently shifted her understanding of her family. The night before the reunion, Emma sat alone in her hotel room, fingertips tracing the sealed edge of the envelope. She didn't open it. She didn't have to. She had read it dozens of times. Every gene marker, every technical phrase, every not a match, etched like a blade against her identity. Would she reveal it tomorrow? Or leave it buried, protecting the illusion of family stability? She hadn't decided. But the fact that she brought it with her, kept it close in her purse, was confirmation enough this truth had already changed her, whether she spoke it aloud or not. Tomorrow at the reunion, she might stay silent. Or maybe that very silence would be the final ending to a long, unspoken chain of pain. The next afternoon, Greenwich offered up a flawless summer sky, so pristine it felt staged, as if even the weather were playing a role in the Carter family's polished performance. Emma Carter drove slowly down the cobblestone lanes leading to the estate, her grip tight on the wheel, her chest filled with a mixture of calculated calm and rising storm. As she stepped through the front gate, Emma was immediately met with the familiar rhythm of a production where every family member had a part, a script, and a curated smile. This wasn't a reunion. It was a show, and everyone knew their lines. The grand foyer shimmered with opulence, polished floors, floral centerpieces arranged with military precision silver trays passing through the crowd. Her mother Margaret greeted her with a soft smile and a gentle embrace. "You look lovely, Emma," she whispered. "Your father's in the garden with the Winslows." It sounded less like a welcome and more like a weather alert. Emma wove through clusters of guests, some relatives, others longtime business associates, dressed up as family friends. They offered firm handshakes and empty compliments. "Still not married, Wall Street must be stressful. Charles must be so proud of you." Each phrase was a variation of the same polite performance, but Charles never approached her. When he entered from the garden flanked by 3 well-dressed men, his trusted partners, his eyes swept the room, grazing past Emma like she was part of the decor. No greeting, no smile, just a nod as impersonal as a hotel bellhop, and then he turned away. Emma had grown used to it, but it still landed like a fist to the chest. Soon after, Grace found her pulling her into a quick hug. "I saw the car," she whispered. "Dad's got it parked right by the front entrance. He's given 3 tours already. Didn't say who bought it. Just kept calling it what success looks like when you work for it." Emma sipped her wine, the bitterness seeping into her throat. As the afternoon wore on, the entire event fell into its familiar loop. Drew was center stage, animatedly recounting his latest real estate development, some multi-use complex in Boston. Charles sat beside him, beaming, chiming in with phrases like, "That's the Carter vision and it's in our blood." Laughter followed, nods, admiration, and Emma, she sat on the edge, both literally and symbolically placed next to a second cousin she barely recognized, pretending to be engaged with her wine glass. That's where she always was, on the fringe, not just of the room, but of the family itself. The envelope in her purse pulsed like a second heartbeat, a secret ticking beneath the surface, quietly reminding her no matter how well-rehearsed the performance, this family structure had never been real for her. As dessert plates were cleared and brandy glasses were gently filled, Emma Carter dared to believe the evening might end without new wounds. But in the Carter family, no annual gathering was truly complete without Charles's impromptu speech, a tradition as choreographed as it was cruel. As soon as he pushed back his chair and stood, the room fell silent. Forks paused midair. Conversations froze. All eyes turned toward the patriarch. Charles raised his glass voice, smooth and commanding. "I'm proud of what the Carter family has built, not just in wealth, but in legacy, tradition, and unity." He turned to Drew first, predictably. "Drew, your leadership on the Boston project has elevated our company to new heights. That kind of vision is rare. You've not only continued the Carter legacy, you've expanded it. I'm proud of you, son." Drew nodded with modest pride as the table applauded. Then came Grace. "Grace, your ability to balance family and philanthropy is a testament to your character. Your mother and I are grateful. You are a reflection of everything this family stands for." Margaret beamed and Grace smiled, though her eyes flickered toward Emma, quietly uneasy. Then Charles paused. His gaze shifted toward Emma for the first time that night, and she knew. She recognized the stillness, the preparation. This wasn't a compliment coming. It was a carefully aimed strike. "I'm proud of all my children," he began, voice slow and solemn. "Except the loser." The room froze. A few awkward laughs escaped guests, assuming it was some strange family joke. Others remained quiet, their eyes darting toward Emma as if waiting for her response. For a moment she heard nothing, just the rush of blood in her ears, the hollow thump of her heart, and a chill that swept through her chest. Charles continued, casual, as if commenting on the weather. "Some people measure success with titles and salaries, but without roots, those things are just foam. True success comes from honoring family tradition, not chasing personal validation through numbers on a spreadsheet." Emma didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Everyone knew who he meant. Her mother murmured her name under her breath, but Charles didn't stop. He never turned to face his daughter. He didn't need to say her name. His omission was the cruelest cut of all. Emma remained still, fingers tightening around her water glass. She'd always imagined she might cry if this moment came, or that she'd walk out in fury. But instead, something inside her stilled. She wasn't angry. She was clear. His words hadn't broken her. They had clarified everything. And just like that, the envelope in her purse stopped feeling like a wound. It started to feel like freedom. The dining room remained frozen in the wake of Charles Carter's brutal declaration. Some guests avoided Emma's gaze. Others stared openly transfixed, as if watching a slow-motion collision they couldn't look away from. But Emma didn't lower her head. She didn't excuse herself like in years past. There were no tears, no begging. She simply stood up. The movement was quiet, deliberate, so subtle it silenced the room. A single shift of energy in a space saturated with tension. All eyes turned toward her. Emma placed her wine glass on the table, smoothed the fabric of her dress, and spoke. "Thank you, Father, for that illuminating speech." She didn't raise her voice. It wasn't necessary. Her tone was measured, clear and resolute. It was the voice of a woman who'd negotiated in boardrooms filled with dismissive men and who was now speaking her truth in the one room that had always silenced her. I've spent 32 years trying to earn something that I now understand will never be given. I graduated top of my class, built my career without a cent from this family, worked twice as hard just to hear one thing from you. I'm proud of you. But today, I finally understand that moment will never come. The room held its breath. Emma slowly reached into her purse and withdrew the white envelope. She placed it gently in the center of the table, directly in front of Charles. These are DNA test results. I had suspicions, and I had them confirmed. Charles Carter is not my biological father. A sharp inhale came from Margaret. Charles sat motionless, brandy glass frozen midair. Emma's voice didn't waver. I blamed myself for decades for never being good enough, for never being loved properly. But the truth is, it wasn't about effort. It was about blood. And if that's the case, why should I keep living to please a man who was never capable of loving me without condition? Charles opened his mouth, but Emma stepped back. She dipped her head not in defeat, but in closure. "Happy Independence Day," she said softly, the irony in her voice sharp. Then she turned and walked away from the table. No one stopped her. She moved through a sea of stunned silence, leaving behind 32 years of striving for approval from a man who never intended to give it. Emma Carter left the dining room with steady, deliberate steps. Behind her chairs, scraped whispers erupted, and confusion surged in the wake of the truth bomb she had just dropped. But she didn't look back. The front door opened and the cool evening air greeted her like freedom. Garden lights cast a golden glow across the stone walkway. The estate where she had grown up now felt like a stage, with the curtain-drawn echoes of performances past still lingering in the air. The black Mercedes still sat in the driveway, precisely where her father had parked it to show off to guests like some hard-won trophy. But now it no longer symbolized a desperate plea for recognition. Now it was a symbol of awakening. Emma reached into her purse and retrieved the spare key, the one she had kept, despite pretending there was only one. The car beeped softly in response, a quiet affirmation of her choice. She opened the door and slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel with the calm of someone who knew exactly what this moment meant. She wasn't running away in defeat. She was driving toward liberation. Through the windshield, she saw silhouettes moving behind the wide bay window. Some pointed. Others filtered out onto the porch. Then, like a final scene in a film, Charles Carter stepped into view, standing in the doorway, envelope open in one hand, his mouth moving in words Emma couldn't hear. Maybe it was her name. Maybe a denial. Whatever it was, it no longer mattered. She started the engine. The car hummed to life with a confident purr, the sound low and smooth like the beginning of something new. She shifted into reverse, the tires crunching softly against the gravel as the house began to shrink in her rearview mirror. She was no longer the daughter chasing affection, no longer the woman offering luxury for acknowledgement, no longer the shadow standing at the edge of family portraits. At that moment, Emma took back the car and with it the reins to her own life. Less than 10 minutes after Emma Carter drove away from the Carter estate, her phone buzzed for the first time. Grace lit up on the car's dashboard. Then again, and again. Followed by Mom, then Drew, and then an unknown number. She didn't answer, but she didn't turn the phone off either. Part of her wanted to witness the fallout, not out of revenge, but to confirm that this time the impact could not be swept under a rug. By the time she checked into her downtown hotel, she had over 10 missed calls and nearly 20 unread messages. Emma took a hot shower, changed clothes, then sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, feeling lighter than she ever expected. Not peaceful exactly, but clear. The first texts were from Grace. "Emma, what happened?" The house is imploding. Dad's screaming, Mom's crying. Drew's saying something about suing over the car. I don't know what to do. Later, a voicemail from her mother came in calm at first. Sweetheart, your father is upset. Please don't escalate this. By the third message, Margaret's voice was cracking. If that test is real, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Emma sat silently watching the screen light up with each buzz like the pulse of a house that had just collapsed behind her. Drew, true to form, sent only 2 short texts. Return the car immediately. If you keep spreading false accusations, Dad's lawyer will be in touch. She laughed not with joy or pain, but with the strange clarity of someone who had finally seen everyone for who they truly were. Hours later, Grace called again. This time Emma answered. Her sister's voice was low, like she'd hidden herself away in a quiet corner of the still chaotic house. Are you okay? I am, Emma replied. How's it over there? Disaster, Grace sighed. Right after you left, Dad opened the envelope at the table. Mom took one look and disappeared into her room. Locked the door. Dad's been yelling, making calls. Drew immediately started texting lawyers. I don't know what he's planning, but he's clearly panicking. There was a pause. Emma. Grace hesitated. Is it true? The test. Emma closed her eyes. Yes. I double-checked. Charles isn't my biological father. Grace was silent for a moment. Then gently, without judgment, she said, Then, suddenly everything makes sense. I always saw how he treated you differently. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Emma nodded, throat tight. Amid all the chaos, that simple acknowledgement brought her the most peace, not her mother's wavering apologies, not Drew's threats, but Grace's quiet validation after years of silence. 3 days after the family gathering, a silver sedan pulled up outside the hotel where Emma was staying. She had expected this, even hoped for it. And the person who stepped out was none other than Margaret Carter, her mother. Margaret didn't look like someone recovering from a family meltdown, but her eyes, always poised with a dignified calm, now seemed fractured like a porcelain mask that had finally cracked after decades of pressure. They sat across from each other in the hotel cafe. The air between them was heavy but not hostile. Emma waited, not because she had nothing to say, but because this time she didn't need to go first. Finally, Margaret spoke. Her voice was softer, stripped of its usual authority. Your father. He wasn't the first man I loved. She began, eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Before Charles, there was someone else. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't have influence. But with him, I felt free. Emma didn't blink. It didn't last, Margaret continued. My family disapproved. The pressure led me to choose Charles, the safe choice. But when I found out I was pregnant with you, I knew the child wasn't his. A long silence followed. I should have told you long ago, Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. But I was afraid. Afraid Charles wouldn't accept you. Afraid I'd lose everything. And part of me was selfish. I hoped that if we pretended hard enough, you'd be loved like the others. Emma gave a soft, bitter smile. Not because it soothed her, but because the truth which had always lurked in cold glances and unspoken dismissals had finally been given a name. I know he never truly accepted you, Margaret admitted, but I never imagined he'd humiliate you like that in front of everyone. Emma remained silent. Part of her wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to close her eyes and let the echoes of memory settle one last time. I'm sorry, Margaret said, and this time it sounded genuine. Not for the secret itself, but for letting you grow up in a home where you always felt like the outsider. Among the clinks of spoons and cafe chatter, Emma realized she no longer needed that apology, but she appreciated that it had finally been said. Do you know who my biological father was? She asked. Margaret nodded, eyes shimmering. He passed away, but But he was a good man. Emma nodded back. No further questions. She didn't need more of the past. What needed to be understood had been. 1 week after the conversation with her mother, Emma sat in her private office, gazing through the tall glass window as golden sunlight bathed the distant skyline. On her desk lay a folder inside the name and address of the man Margaret had once loved. The man confirmed to be her biological father, Daniel Hayes. Unlike some dramatic movie narrative, Emma didn't rush to find him the moment she had the name. She spent 3 days simply thinking, not out of hesitation, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted to do something not to be seen, not to be validated, but out of peaceful curiosity. When she finally arrived, it was a small lakefront home in Vermont. No gates, no luxury cars, just the scent of pine and the sound of wind brushing through the porch beams. Daniel Hayes answered the door. A silver-haired man, lean with eyes that were soft and kind. He looked at Emma for a moment and asked gently, "You're Emma, aren't you?" She nodded. He didn't pull her into an embrace. He didn't cry. But he welcomed her inside, poured tea, and waited quietly, letting her speak first. Emma told her story. Not every detail, but enough for Daniel to understand. She didn't speak of pain or rejection. She simply shared what it felt like to grow up in a house where she never quite belonged, and how she now just wanted to understand a missing part of herself. Daniel listened intently without judgment. He didn't apologize, didn't try to take responsibility for the years gone by. And that strangely brought Emma peace. This meeting wasn't about reparations. It was about creating a connection that asked for nothing. That afternoon, they walked along the lake together. Daniel spoke of the quiet years teaching at a public school, editing manuscripts, growing tomatoes. Not successful by the world's flashy standards, but rich in a different way in peace. On the way back, he pointed at an old wooden bench beneath a maple tree. "When I was younger," he said, "I used to dream of having a daughter. I don't know why, but I always imagined she'd be sharp. Strong." Emma turned to look at him. She didn't say anything. She smiled. Not because the words were grand, but because for the first time someone had said something about her without expectations, without conditions. And that was enough. Months after her visit with Daniel Hayes, Emma Carter moved into a modest, sun-drenched apartment in San Francisco's Mission District. It wasn't a luxury penthouse, no private boardrooms or assistants, just white walls, a few green plants, and a space meant for living, not performing. On moving day, she unpacked alone, hanging a single photo on the wall, a snapshot by the Vermont lake, where she and Daniel had quietly sat watching the sunlight ripple across the water. It wasn't her most dramatic memory, but it was her most peaceful. Emma no longer called home regularly. Charles cut ties completely after she refused to return the car. Drew sent an email titled "Formal Warning," but never followed up. Her mother, Margaret, would occasionally text, not to lecture or control, but simply to connect as one person to another. She still worked, but not 14-hour days. She turned down an offer to lead a major investment fund, choosing instead to consult with startups founded by women. Not to prove anything, but because for the first time she was choosing what made her feel enough. One afternoon, Emma strolled through the park near her building. No makeup, a soft turtleneck sweater, coffee in hand. A little girl dashed past, spilling a splash of juice onto her shoes. The child's mother rushed over, apologizing profusely. Emma smiled. "It's okay. I used to be the clumsiest kid on the block." A few people recognized her, but instead of swarming for photos or advice, they just nodded. She nodded back. Gently. No pressure. No weight of titles or expectations. That evening, Emma sat by the window, the city lights casting soft shadows on the walls. She opened her notebook and wrote her first line in weeks. I don't need to be seen to be valid. I don't need to prove to exist. I just need to live true to myself. There was no applause, no headlines. No one called her a genius or an extraordinary woman. And that was her greatest victory, to live without performing, to exist without proving.